Welcome back to Nourished Inside Out, the space where growth gets real and self love leads the way. I'm your host, Aneta Walklaw, and before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you of something powerful. You are worthy, you are enough, and you don't need to wait for permission to love yourself fully. That's exactly why I wrote my book, Blooming with Self Love, to give you the tools, affirmations, and daily mindset shifts to help you stand in your power and own your story. This book isn't just words on a page, it's a movement. So if you're ready to stop shrinking and start showing up for yourself, grab your copy today with the link in the show notes below, and let's walk this self love journey together. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. Today I'm here with Christiane Schroeter. She is a top #1 podcaster, #1 Amazon bestselling author, and business coach empowering female entrepreneurs to take bold steps, master petite practices, and create extraordinary results. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. This is going to be a really great episode.
Absolutely. Do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background? Because you're an author and you're a podcaster, but where did you start to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I love that question because one of my books actually has a tree on the front. And right here, hold on. So the roots of the tree is kind of where I'm starting now, my journey. I'm born in Germany, and then you can maybe hear from my beautiful name, Christiane Schroeter. That sounds very German, and it's definitely something that's always a tongue twister for everybody. And then I decided to study abroad and studied in the United States for my master's degree, for my PhD. Then worked in the South for a while, and now I'm living in California where I teach innovation, entrepreneurship, and marketing. And I'm also a business coach. So the students that I teach at the university, I frequently see them later in their mid careers as they are trying to scale their business. So I'm helping them. My first book is called How to Master Your Goals. And that really introduced the Petite Practice trademark method that I'm using. So, really breaking a goal down into small, attainable steps and then weaving that in and really getting to where you want to be and scaling your business ultimately.
That's awesome. You talk a lot about this framework called Petite Practice. Can you explain to us what that is and how you've been able to apply it into your life and now teach others?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I earned a PhD, and that sounds super intimidating. And I have to be honest with you, it is very intimidating actually, because you have to write this dissertation and do research on a certain topic over a long period of time, and you have to be staying passionate about this topic. So there's a lot that goes into it, mindset related. So what I did was I knew once I found a topic, which for me was figuring out how we can change obesity or eating behavior with economic signals such as prices and income. I knew I had to write this all down in my research dissertation. So I looked at a dissertation, which was, on average, maybe 500 pages long. And I took a period of time and I broke down that period of time into how many pages do I need to write per day to get to the final outcome of the 500-page dissertation. And to make this even a little bit more intense and fun for you right now, listeners, I booked a flight for my parents to come from Germany for my graduation. And then once I booked that flight, I knew there was no turning back. I had to write this dissertation. And it turned out to be 2 pages per day that I had to write until I would graduate, until I would defend my dissertation, have enough time to make all the revisions after the defense, and then turn it in. And that's really a petite practice in a nutshell. You have a goal, you're taking the end time frame in mind because it's important to actually set a time. And then you reverse engineer and what does it take to reach that goal? Sometimes what we notice is that our goals are changing, right? That's totally fine. And sometimes we realize that the small steps that we take actually are leading to successes or to failures. But the main thing is you're taking action every single day. So that's with a small part. And then you are practicing, which is the petite practice word in itself.
I love that because it's really breaking it down. I think a lot of times, often we get told, what's a long-term goal and what's a short-term goal and write it down. And I think it's great that we have those goals, but how do we achieve it? It's how do we get there, and breaking it down step by step and doing small little actions every single day will eventually get you to where you want to be.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
think that
share?
the
Go
beautiful
ahead.
thing here is that our goals can change. So I always
Mhm.
tell my clients and my students, I give you permission to change your goal.
Mm.
We are human. We don't need to be stuck in a certain mindset. You can change your preferences, your beliefs, and you can change your goals. I give you permission to do that.
Yeah, when it comes to your coaching, what kind of people do you tend to work with in your coaching?
It's mostly business owners or people that want to
Okay.
own a business, entrepreneurs that have a big idea and really trying to put that idea into action and actually make money with it.
That's incredible because I think a lot of times it's so easy to get stuck in the mindset of, I went to college for this, I have to stick with this. So you really help them peel back the layers and let them know that it's okay to change careers, and it doesn't have to be overnight, but if we do one step a day, then it'll be a lot more of a smoother transition.
For sure. And I also believe that when you go to earn a degree, no matter where, no matter how, no matter what type of degree, you always need to think a little bit of what is it really that you are learning and becoming a better human being. Because at the end of the day, we are looking at the learning process as something we also learn about ourselves and how we use those tools in interacting with society. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's not just a class or an exam that you finish, but it's more really what did you take away that taught you a little bit more about yourself and how you can use it in your everyday life.
Yeah, that's so true. Can you share us the journey of your podcast and how that was created and how it climbed to the top 1%, and what did you learn along the way?
Yeah, so the podcast we just talked about, the Petite Practices, started just like that. I basically had a goal of getting my voice out to wider audiences beyond the classroom, beyond my coaching, and I figured the best way is for the whole world to be able to tune in, and then started recording just on my cell phone, just in my house, no fancy equipment or managers or anything included. And basically had so much fun with it because of the feedback that I received. So I think that if you have a goal in mind, you just need to get started because messy action is always better than sitting on the sidelines and waiting for that someday to come. Just take messy action, and I think that the messy action then will in itself be a teaching moment because you're going to become better and better. And it's always great to look back and say, oh wow, those early days, that was quite something. And I think that for me, when I did the podcast, I never really tuned into ranks or lists, and I didn't even know for the longest time that the podcast would be ranked like that until one of my friends reached out to me and shared that with me. So if
Oh.
your goal is to start a podcast and to push that podcast into the top ranks, that's totally fair. I think that sometimes having a metric like that in mind takes away from the human goal, which is really sharing your message. And in my case, I always say, make my mess my message. So by
Mhm.
now, I'm telling you that was a messy beginning, and that's my message right now. I think that being more on the sense of how can I help others in getting started, and I didn't even think about the metrics or anything like that, will probably lead to much higher results than just thinking about, oh, how is this ranking, how is this helping, because you really need to more think about the greater outcome of it.
I really like what you just said. How can I make my mess into my message? Because so many times we can catch ourselves procrastinating or pushing things off to do, like starting that podcast, starting that TikTok, writing that book, because we can get into the habit of thinking, I'm too broken for this, or what can other people learn from me? But the reality is that you're exactly where you need to be because you're in a mess. That's the perfect reason to start because you're going to start to find clarity and you're going to start to find people who can relate with you and people who want to listen to what you have to say. So I really love how you framed that.
Yeah, and I think that the mess is frequently what creates your resonance with your audience, because there will
Mhm.
be other people that will be attracted to you because they have a similar mess or maybe even the same. And that's really how you're going to attract listeners and audience and ultimately clients, that you are open and you're sharing that. Now you need to decide what is it that you would like to share, because oversharing is also another thing. But maybe you would choose three topics that you want to talk about. And those are really the ones that also share vulnerable, that you are human, and what is it really that you experienced yourself, and maybe even a point of transformation, and that would be absolutely magic.
That's incredible. What are some of the most common challenges that female entrepreneurs face, and how do you help them overcome those obstacles?
It's always the same. It's confidence.
Mm.
I think if there were to be a dollar or maybe even a cent for every time that I'm boosting somebody's confidence, right, I would have like a big jar here on my desk by now. And I think that, like, because I have two daughters, I see how the culture creates this lack of confidence, and how it is really hard to make your voice being heard. So for me, the main thing is that I let people know that their message is very important to be heard. And especially when it is messy, it's even more important to be heard. So when I teach innovation entrepreneurship, I frequently look at the first slide decks of my clients, and they're very polished and they're beautiful and they have a gorgeous mock-up and a product on there and tagline, and everything looks just also amazing. And then I tell them that, I don't know, like, if you go to a website and you click on about and you start reading the story of the founder, do you really want to read a story that is picture perfect? I think what's
Mm.
going to pull you in is a story that shares their struggle and how they overcame it, and how this particular product or service helped them overcome that struggle. So frequently we don't have the confidence in sharing that because we feel that it's going to make us look like we are less. Where in reality, a good leader is the one that actually becomes vulnerable and shares their flaws, their limitations, and their boundaries, because we are starting to feel that person is just like us.
That's really well said. I like that you went back to when you see a brand that looks perfect and you go into their about page and you read about their story, you want to read about a story that you can relate with. Heard this quote a few weeks ago and it said, if you look at something that's beautiful, just remember it didn't start beautiful. It started as a mess. Or if you take a look at like the caterpillar and the butterfly example, the butterfly is so beautiful, but the mess was the caterpillar in a dark cocoon, and it had to take time to grow through that and process before it bloomed into a butterfly. So it's so true because whatever you see on the outside, it may be beautiful, but it didn't always start like that.
Exactly. And I think that we all have something beautiful to share with the world. And coming back to the confidence element, it's just for you to figure out what that is. And that's your superpower. Is it maybe that you're amazing with art, music or painting? Or is it maybe you are a great storyteller? Or maybe you have a wonderful idea about listening to others and helping them through their problems. So that's what I call beautiful. It's not always what in the commercial sense we think is symmetric and gorgeous and it's like visible to the eye. It could even be, as I mentioned, that artist. It could even be something that's beautiful to the ear or it feels beautiful. And I think that we have sometimes a very one-dimensional idea about what is beautiful. And so I love that you bring up the caterpillar butterfly comparison because even the caterpillar is beautiful in itself. And I think that the transformation here is really something that we frequently become too impatient. It's like, oh, it's never going to work out, and I'm going to try something different. When in reality, all those learning steps, if you talk to a business owner, are frequently what they actually remember later on. And that's really what created their resilience and their grit in the stories that they're going to be sharing. It's not like, oh yeah, here I am at the end of my journey, which by the way never ends. It's more really the steps along the way, the people that they met, and maybe even the missteps that they took that they will remember.
Yeah, that's very well said. It's exactly like that. What seems like a mess is actually your opportunity to create it into something great. Something that I've also learned recently is that all of the things that you were insecure about yourself when you were younger or past version of yourselves, those are actually your superpowers. Those are what your strengths that you need to start loving about yourself in order to move forward. Because if you can't love all of yourself, even the parts that you think that are not appealing, they're actually your strengths and they're your beautiful gifts. So I completely agree on that.
I think that's great that you bring up that
Yeah.
word. Definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. Do you help do you help people identify what their strengths are and how to use their what they call quote unquote their weaknesses as for strengths? Can you walk us through that?
Mhm. Yeah, so to kind of like maybe break it down into three steps, which I
Mhm.
frequently do with my clients, I always think first you need to figure out why this is important to you. And there's a famous research piece that actually says you ask yourself why 5 times. Because at the beginning, your why
Mm.
might just be monetary or it might be just scratching the surface, but you keep asking, why is this so important? And why is this important? And all of a sudden, you have a much deeper understanding. So it's kind of like an iceberg, and you really look down below the surface. You don't just see the top portion of where you ultimately want to be, but you also look more and like everything that's leading to that point. So that's the first step, figuring out your why, because ultimately you might have to come back to that on those days when you're not motivated.
Mhm.
And secondly, what's really important and what I feel is so tremendous is that you really look at your culture and your roots. Because that we talked earlier about the story and the website, ultimately, I might be sharing a 2 hour lesson with my clients or with my students, but frequently they remember just the 10 minutes that I talked about my children and the birthday party we just had last weekend, which was maybe focused on worms, something crazy. And then they keep asking me about how was that party with the worms where you made that pudding with those chocolate pieces on the top and those little gummy worms on the top. And that's what sticks. And so what you need to figure out is you need to start looking into your culture, your upbringing. What was it really special to you that came easy to you? Or what was it really where you felt you were completely in flow, like in your element? And now this is really important. So the why is important. Looking at your roots is really, really important and your culture and start making this also part of your maybe now one dimensional, but maybe making it more like a multi-dimensional piece. The third element that I always really think about is we all have something really unique to share, but what's important is you actually need to verbalize your goal, your purpose, and your superpower to others. Because
Mm.
it could be that what you believe your superpower is, others have a completely different understanding about, or they're not even aware about that. So the more you start building your community and start collaborating with others, the more others will become aware about it and start seeking you out for it and start appreciating for who you are. And I think that we frequently underestimate that sharing our superpowers and our goals is, sometimes we are ashamed about it. And they're like, oh, yeah, I want to do this thing. And then they're like, don't laugh about it. It's like, why would I laugh about it? So it's so important that after you figure out your why, after you look at your culture, you start sharing it, because alone verbalizing it will already make you believe that you can actually do it.
That's really great and really well said. I really like how you said look back at your culture because my roots are originally from Poland. So it's, I don't, I wasn't born there, so I only know as much as I know. But I know that, like, the family members that I was around, it's like communication was not very much a thing. It was like, we're going to show our love by doing things for you, but we're not going to communicate that much. So I had to learn that love and respect was earned by doing things for other people and vice versa instead of actually communicating it. But when you can learn to communicate or even understand why you have certain patterns because of your cultures, then it gives you the opportunity to open a door and grow from there as well.
Well, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I think that that probably changed now that you're aware that you grew
Hmm.
up this way. It made you much more conscious about, maybe that's something I need to let others know, that I'm not experienced with verbalizing love or appreciation, that I'm more a doer. And I think there's a famous book that's called The Four Love Languages or anything like that. Maybe it's even the five, I don't know. There's some number with love languages. And we are all different types of how we express love. And frequently, of course, as you mentioned, it comes back to how we grew up. So knowing more about how you grew up and how you shaped your personality, your character, makes you much more appreciate who you are right now. And also verbalizing that with our partners makes our relationship with others much better. So it's learning about yourself and then sharing that with others. That's really the magic here.
Absolutely. What are some tips that you would recommend to people to start identifying those patterns and to really start diving deep into their childhood, whether it was something that was happening in childhood or the way they grew up or their culture? How do you encourage people to start diving deeper into that?
But honestly, there's one thing that I see happening over and over and over again with my clients is we talk about the upbringing, we talk about the culture, and then I always ask them, tell me about one defining moment in your childhood or in your adolescence that really you felt changed the trajectory where you are today. Just one thing
Mm.
that you really remember. And it could be traumatic, or it could be something where you really felt this had a big impact. You're still remembering this today. And it is so interesting, to be honest with you, how frequently that particular moment is related to somebody destroying our dreams. Like, for instance,
Mm.
maybe you really like drawing and you made these paintings, and then your art teacher came around and looked at your drawing and said, well, that doesn't look good. And maybe even did something dramatic like taking up your art and crumbling it up. I have to be honest, this really happened, right? Somebody just told me about this recently, and it's
Wow.
absolutely, terrible. But then again, I hear this over and over and over again. Oh, I wanted to become a soccer player, but then I injured my knee, and my soccer coach told me this will never heal, and you are just done. And those people are, 12, 13-year old when that happened. And now they are in their 20s or 30s, and they basically gave up on their dream because of an injury that happened, like 2 centuries ago. So
Wow.
frequently, I think we brush this aside and then think it didn't really matter. Where in reality, I think it's still like it's like a little flame. It's still there somewhere in your mind, and maybe you feel you gave up on yourself because you gave up on that dream. And that's
Mm.
what is always the number one revelation with my clients, to go back to that moment and to figure out why this particular moment, A, why you still remember that, and B, what was so tremendously important about it. And then we kind of peel back. Why did this matter? Is there something that you feel you still want to do today? Art? Who says that the art teacher is the person that determines whether your art is amazing or not? Right? Why not, get your art out again and start over again? So I think that in my coaching, I frequently see that we always look forward and think, oh, I need to learn this, I need to learn that. And where are going to be the careers where in reality there is already something in the past, and maybe you're kind of shoving it aside, but celebrating those small wins from the past where you felt you were really in your unique element, in your superpower, and maybe
Mhm.
picking those up again is where I always see the magic happens. When I call it the pupils dilate, when people are like,
Mm.
oh, I remember I
Mhm.
used to draw and I don't even know why I'm not doing this. And then I keep asking, they're like, oh, now I know why I'm not doing this anymore because of this one defining moment. And then I'm like, okay, and that completely ruined art for you for the rest of your life. And then they realize how ridiculous that is. And then all of a sudden, the wheel starts spinning. And it's like, maybe, maybe this was just one person that might have had just a bad day. And it wasn't about my art at
Mhm.
all. It was just somebody that had something that bugged them, and they thought that this particular day was the day they need to verbalize that. Yeah, that's when the magic happens.
Wow, there's so much good pointers in there. I really like what you said though, is that maybe that person's art isn't even bad. Maybe that person was just having a bad day and they took it out on that person. And what they didn't know is when they were taking their anger out on somebody else, they're literally crushing somebody's dream. And that's just, I'm a firm believer that like people treat you based on a reflection of who they are and how they're feeling, not what you did. Because so many times we get into the mindset of, what's wrong with me? What did I do? Why did I hurt them? Reality is you didn't hurt them, especially if you're a kid. Your kids are so innocent, but kids are so pliable with their brain, because if you tell them one thing, then they're going to believe that. You tell them another thing, they're going to believe it. And I think one of the most important things as we get older is to still keep that childlike mentality of not being afraid to go for your dreams, because so many times when we grow up, people say, your dreams are not achievable. That dream is too big. That goal, it doesn't make sense. You should do this instead of that. And we get voices from every single angle instead of saying, no, this is what I want to do and this is what I'm going to do. So I really love how like you go back into childhood and you're like, well, what was that one defining moment?
Mhm.
Because that's truly where it starts.
Completely true. And I think that I love how you brought this up with regard to children and how pliable they are, because it's the words, but it's also the actions, of course. And given that I have two teenage daughters, wellness is tremendously important for me, as is confidence. And
Hmm.
so for me, I cannot teach my children how to be healthy if I don't eat healthy myself or if I don't work out myself. So I have to be a role model, not just by saying things like, oh, you should maybe leave the house and eat something healthy. I need to do it myself. And at the same time, I also need to compliment them on their character and not just on the way that they look like. So saying something like, "Oh, you look so pretty today," which is, maybe like a very shallow compliment, and maybe it's amazing. That's true. But at the same time, it's also great to just say something like, "Oh, I really appreciated how you did this." So focusing more on an action instead of just an appearance is tremendous, especially for females, and it really boosts your confidence.
That's really true. I think that's a beautiful way of how you can start improving how you compliment people is by complimenting their character instead of how they look, because we live in a social media kind of world. People are always caring about how they look, but behind your looks, what is your character like? That is so much more important. And now that you said this, it literally just brought me back to, I mean, this, I've had a couple teachers like this who would say, do as I say, not as I do. And I can't stand that because it's like, how are you going to sit here and teach me this if you're not doing it yourself? I remember I was in cosmetology school and my teacher would be doing a demonstration and then she would do something and then someone would question it and she would always respond, do as I say, not as I do. Close your eyes when I do that. And I'm like, how does that's no, it doesn't make sense. So I love how you are being the example for your daughters by being the example so they have someone to follow, not just saying things.
It's beautiful because now that you mentioned cosmetology school, my daughters, as teenagers, struggle with their skin, with their hair. And so I always emphasize to them that there are simple things we can do at home. And, like, for instance, not touching your face, especially after you touch your phone, is like one of those simple things. And I
Mm.
share with them stories myself that I used to do this. And then I really struggled with acne, which tremendously impacted my confidence because I had the feeling everybody was looking at my skin. And that small things like that really matter. And I always, like, nowadays, because I speak a lot with my hands, you can tell that I'm so conscious and not touching my face. And when I touch my phone in the evening, I always clean it off. And so, like, saying this, do as I say, is definitely something that will have very little importance because you're actually really not doing it yourself. And I think that's tremendously important that you kind of put this more in the context of, all right, so this is what helped me, and I'm going to share that with you. But at the same time, you actually have to demonstrate that too.
Absolutely. The light will always shine through at the end of the day, as much as you're trying to just cover the dirt over the surface, the light will eventually shine through. So be the example that you want to see and don't just say, do these things, because if you're just saying, do X, Y, and Z, anybody can read a textbook about that. Anybody can read a book about it. But it's, are you truly living out what you're teaching? And you do. And that's beautiful.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Christiane, yeah. So, what does it mean for you to be nourished inside out?
Well, you can tell this is a beautiful question. I'm drinking herbal tea during the day, right? So I that's maybe one habit that I brought with me from Europe. Um, when I came to the United States, at the beginning, I really struggled in drinking water, just especially the non-sparkling kind. But I feel it's so important for your skin, for your body, but also, of course, for your brain to nourish yourself inside and out. So I wake up and I drink fluids, and during the day, I drink a lot of herbal tea. And it's tremendously important. I do a lot of research about certain fruits and vegetables and the attributes that they have that I put in my mouth, the benefits that they lead to, how they interact with each other. So I feel the nourishment really for me also comes from learning more about myself and what really impacts my body and how it impacts it. Because I might enjoy some food and it really does benefits to me, and somebody else might completely not enjoy this whatsoever. I think that in general, nourishment also means that you are listening to your body and you're trying to be in tune with what your body needs. And at the same time, of course, you're also trying to figure out, I call it like my little first aid kit, right? If you're maybe having a hard time or a hard day, what is it that would your body need on that particular day to nourish. And what can you do with very simple steps? I have like no medication at my home because I feel that the best nourishments actually come then somewhat from natural ingredients, or maybe you just need to rest. So nourishment also comes back to just tuning in with your inner voice and letting that voice speak to you.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And can you please tell us where can people stay in touch with you and support you?
I would love for the audience to tune in to my website. It's called drchristiane.com. On my podcast, I share a lot of business and wellness tips, and that one is called Happy Healthy Hustle. And then, of course, if you want to take my superpower quiz, Discover Your Superpower, that is free. Go to my website, there's a tab there. And I also would love to share that with the audience because it's my way of, it's very fun and it's fast, but it's also my way of maybe helping you getting the first little wheels spinning in your head about what you're amazing at and what you can share with the world.
Amazing. I'll have all of that linked down in the show notes below so people can stay in touch. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.